If inconsistency was a driver, Lance Stroll would be the first name that pops in your head. A driver that has his good moments, but a lot of bad ones as well. Plenty of crashes, weird moments, and overall never performing and qualifying with the car that he's given. Throughout his years, all the teammates that he's versed, he's usually been on the lower end of it. Lance has a lot of potential, but clearly with the start in 2024 and the previous seasons, there is something wrong with the driving style he's performing with. There are 3 things I want to go over with Lance's driving style. Why he's so good in the wet weather, why he's so inconsistent in qualifying, and why Lance's improvement has been so minimal from the start of his career. Before getting into the bigger part of the video, I wanted to thank you guys for support on the channel. We hit 35,000, which is just an insane number, and we're continuing to grow. Getting close to 40, which is just unreal to say. So if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe. I upload pretty often, and I hope I can entertain you as well. So thank you so much for coming by. Let's get started with the video. Lance Stroll is a driver that I think gets a lot of flack. Is it justified? I would say in some instances it is, but I do think he gets more hate than anybody on the grid, specifically because he is a paid driver and his dad owns a team. There have been flashes in his career where he really has driven as good as some of the top drivers, but then 2 or 3 races later, we see him driving very inconsistently towards the bottom of the grid, not qualifying great, and not being close to any of his teammates. Since Fernando has joined the team, we can say probably in 2 races, Lance has had a little bit of an edge on Fernando. That's usually because Fernando had a problem, had to start behind, but he really has not had the jump on Fernando. If we look in his past career, we look at Vettel, we look at drivers like Massa when he was in Williams, we look at Perez while he was in Racing Point or Force India. And there were flashes. In 2020, if you look at the races that weren't DNFs or problems, it was 4-4 in the race-to-race head-to-head. Now in qualifying, if you look at any of these years, he was always super far behind, unless there was some weather changes and changeable conditions. Something that Lance is known for, and the funny joke that this guy drives like Senna while it's wet weather, but then drives like Latifi while it's dry, is because he's had so many great performances in the wet, getting his only pole position, getting himself up in positions he shouldn't be in with a car that probably isn't as great because of weather changes, has always been a strong suit of Lance. Having the ability to drive in the wet is something Formula 1 drivers always strive to have. It's a difficult thing to do because lines are always changing, braking zones are always changing, and you need to be super adaptable. And that's where Lance's strengths come in. A strength for Lance is he's a very reactive driver. He goes with his gut. He even speaks about this in a podcast that was done.
In the last couple of years, I found that actually just getting in the car and being free and being happy and just accepting that it could go well, it could not, but I'm gonna be completely present and take it one corner at a time and connect myself to the grip level, to the surface, to whatever's happening while I'm in the car for the next hour and a half, and we'll see how it goes. I found that approach is actually much better for me because I'm not anticipating what's happening. I think a lot of people drive very, digitally, they brake at this point and they turn at that point. And
having that type of reactive style allows for you to be adaptable in the wet and go for some hard breaks where people won't go. Pretty much means that you have some big balls and you're going for zones that people probably won't take. This helps him keep a lot of speed going into those corners, and that is where he gains a lot of his time. It's usually through braking and keeping a high speed in the corners. He does prefer a car with a little bit of oversteer. He likes turning the car with the actual inputs he uses on gas and brake. And when everything is lined up, he can be quite a beautiful driver to watch, at least when working at the wheel. He likes to hack at it. It's not so much smooth inputs like a Max Verstappen. But that's where a lot of the drama comes along with his driving style. We see these inconsistencies in qualifying, and so much of this has to do with that reactive driving style. In qualifying, many drivers prep their laps or do their laps based off of where they know they're going to brake and thinking already way ahead before they're even into that corner. Lance even points out that during the qualifying or during that lap that he's performing, he goes into those corners reactively, so he's trying to work on the car. Pretty much like he's taming a horse for the first time. It's very unpredictable what's going to happen to the car, but he's still going into this corner to what he thinks is the highest amount of brake he can get into there and the highest amount of speed he can carry through the corner. That is why there are so many mistakes. These mistakes come because of these inconsistencies. It's not driving with what the sim tells you and where you should be braking, where you shouldn't, and then adapting that way with, should I brake here harder? Should I brake here earlier to get better speed? He's doing that in those moments. And while this works really good in the wet weather, in qualifying, this will never work out for you. And in qualifying, he usually puts himself further back, has to make it up in the race. If you're behind a lot of drivers, your tire wear starts to become an issue. With that tire wear issue, sometimes he falls back in the race. We see him get antsy, get mad on the radio, complain about the straight line speed. Specifically here in 2024, we've already seen it that Fernando is outperforming the car in qualifying and the race, and Lance keeps messing up in qualifying, tries coming back in the race like we saw in Bahrain. Australia was a good performance that he actually had. He even out-qualified there Fernando, technically, if you want to go off of it, even with the floor damage. In Saudi, he was nowhere to be found, especially in the race. He was super far behind when it came to pace within those couple of laps that he was racing, and went into the wall because of inconsistencies. We look at Japan, he was making some beautiful overtakes, but he was shredding those tires like butter because of the way he's driving that car, and he had more downforce than Fernando did in Japan. Come now to the China GP we just had. He goes into Ricardo. He was making up some positions, but yet again was shredding those tires like crazy. Did a 4-stop and was still 0.6 off of Fernando. The average gap in the race has been quite high in 2024, and in 2023 it was quite high as well. When Lance is able to use that ability of being reactive and great in the race, it's a beauty to watch. But this comes to haunt him in the overall scheme of a F1 calendar. A 24 race calendar, we will see plenty of mistakes, and this has been something he's had in the beginning of his career to the end of his career. In the beginning, we saw flashes of podiums, even becoming the second youngest person to ever be on a podium, only beaten by Max Verstappen. That's a huge feat to have. He had that pole in Turkey and kept the lead for a lot of laps up until a tire wear issue and making a couple of mistakes. He's had flashes of being extremely fast. He's nowhere near to some of the paid drivers we've seen like Nikita Mazepin and Nicholas Latifi. It's hard to like a driver and keep up with a driver when you don't show that much personality, and when you're racing for your father, there will always be some downsides. Do I think the hate is super unwarranted? I do. I think he's hated way too much in comparison to the rest of the grid. We can't even have Lance interview with certain people or have actually fan signings because of what's going to happen to him if he ends up doing those normal obligations F1 drivers typically do. This probably plays into some of those inconsistencies he's had from the beginning of his career to right now, which is looking like it's going to become the end, with him even being unsure of whether he wants to race. I wonder if Lance is coming to the conclusion that he can't just be as good as some of these top drivers, even though he does have ability. It's very sad to see a driver that is super quick, has shown flashes in his early career, and even in Formula One, not be able to keep those same consistencies, maybe because of lack of discipline like Fernando has, or Lewis Hamilton, or Charles Leclerc, or Max Verstappen. Any of those top drivers are an example of people that put their all and dedication just into one thing, Formula One. Max goes home, he goes in the simulator. Fernando still doesn't even have a family because of how invested he is into the Formula One sport. Leclerc, that's all he thinks about. Lewis Hamilton, that's all he breathes about. That is the definition of a true, amazing athlete. And I think with the career that he's had, having no real pressure causes inconsistencies. You don't end up building a foundation off of how you need to drive from season to season to improve and improve. He's shown a lot of heart, especially when he was hurt back in 2023 in the beginning of the season. He was amazing in both Jeddah and in Bahrain, and I respected it a lot. I respect him a lot, and it's a driver that I wish would be good because I really do like Lance, and I wish he could show off that he is actually a pretty decent driver. I know most of the comments are going to be negative and probably against him. I hope that's not the case, and you look at this video as a more, this is what's been wrong with his driving style, and there truly is pace for Lance. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below, and I get both the negatives and the positives for Lance, so I'd love to hear you guys say. You know, I'm interactive with you all, and it's great to always have a conversation, so thank you so much for watching the video. Please leave a like, subscribe, it'd mean the world, and peace.